All right, here we are again. We're diving into this stack of sources you shared, all focused on, well, a new COVID variant that seems to be making waves.
That's right. The name popping up everywhere is NB.1.8.1.
Yeah, NB.1.8.1. And these sources you sent, they're raising some real questions, aren't they? About what it means, especially, with summer coming up.
Exactly. This collection of articles reports, it gives us a good snapshot of what the experts are tracking right now. It's about understanding this variant, its traits, and, well, the potential ripple effects.
So our goal here is to kind of cut through the noise, unpack what these sources are really highlighting as important. We want to pull out the key bits about NB.1.8.1, its impact, what you really need to know from all this. Okay, let's unpack this.
So jumping right in, the variant is NB.1.8.1, and the sources confirm, yeah, it's definitely gaining momentum globally. The WHO, the World Health Organization, they're watching it.
Watching it closely, it sounds like.
Yeah, because cases are rising in different regions. The sources mention Europe, Southeast Asia.
And the Americas too, right? I saw that mentioned.
Yes, both North and South America. So it's got a pretty wide footprint already, geographically speaking.
Okay, but what about here in the U.S.? What do the sources say about that?
Well, here, the reports note fewer than 20 sequences have been reported so far.
Okay, sequences. Let's pause there for a sec. That term comes up a lot in these reports. For someone following along, what does that actually mean, like practically?
Good question. Yeah, think of a sequence as its genetic fingerprint. When labs analyze a virus sample, they read that genetic code. So reporting a sequence just means they've found that specific MB1.8.1 fingerprint in a sample.
Got it. Fingerprint. So fewer than 20 fingerprints found here. Does that mean it's not really showing up on the main CDC trackers yet?
Not on the main dashboard, no. According to the sources, the CDC only flags variants as like dominant or prevalent if they make up over 1% of cases for 2 weeks straight.
And NB.1.8.1 isn't there yet nationally.
Not nationally.
Yeah.
But, and this is important, your sources do point out specific detection.
Oh, yeah. Like where?
States like Arizona, the health department there found 3 samples, I think it was late April, early May, just through their regular checks.
Okay.
And it's also popped up in Rhode Island and Ohio, based on the info you shared.
So still pretty limited here, it seems, so far. But what about globally? You said it's gaining momentum.
Yeah, that's where the story gets more significant, according to these sources. It's actually the dominant variant in China now.
Wow, dominant already.
Yeah, and it's spread really fast there, apparently since the beginning of the year. And globally, by late April, it accounted for almost 11% of all sequences submitted to a global database.
Whoa, okay, 11% globally by late April. Wasn't it way lower just like a few weeks before that?
Oh, absolutely. The sources highlight that. Earlier in April, it was maybe around 2.5% globally.
So that jumped to nearly 11%. That really shows how quickly it can spread once it gets going.
Exactly. That's a key data point. And it seems to be replacing the previously dominant one, LP 8.1. That was the main one worldwide before this. Your sources show that as MB 1.8.1 rose, LP.8.1 started becoming less common, especially from mid-April onwards.
Okay, so we know where it is and that it spreads fast globally. But the big question, and something these sources really dig into, is what does it do? Is it, more transmissible? Does it make you sicker? Is it better at dodging our immunity?
Right, and this is where the sources give us some really important pieces based on the current data. First off, transmissibility.
Yes, it's more transmissible.
It appears to be, yes, more transmissible than LP.8.1, the one that's sort of pushing out globally.
Yeah.
That ability to spread easier is definitely something highlighted in these reports.
Okay, that could explain more cases, potentially. But what about how sick it makes people? Or getting past immunity? Are the sources saying it's worse there?
Well, this is where the news is maybe a bit more reassuring based on current evidence, of course, the WHO.
Oh.
These reports say they found no evidence that MB.1.8.1 leads to more severe illness compared to LP.8.1.
No evidence of more severe illness.
Correct. The sources say the WHO has determined it doesn't pose an added health risk based on what they know right now.
Okay, so it spreads easier, but doesn't seem to make people sicker. What about immunity? Does it get around our vaccines or past infections any better?
The sources look at that too.
Yeah.
And it does not seem to be significantly better than LP.8.1 at evading protection, whether that's from vaccines or from having had COVID before.
Huh. Okay, so That's a really critical point then, based on what these experts and the WHO are saying so far. More transmissible, yeah, but not obviously worse at making you seriously ill or dodging immunity any more than the last variant. I think I saw quote one expert saying it doesn't look like it'll drive a huge surge here in the US, at least not yet.
Exactly right, which leads to, a really interesting question the sources raise. If it's not inherently worse in those ways, why are experts still talking about a possible rise in cases? Maybe even a, quote, mild to moderate summer uptick, like some reports suggest.
Yeah, that's the puzzle, isn't it? If it's not more severe or evasive, why the concern about more cases this summer?
The sources point to a combination of things. One is definitely that increased transmissibility we just talked about. That potential gives it fuel.
Right.
But the other really crucial piece, especially for the U.S. situation, is population immunity.
Ah, okay. What specifically do the sources say about our immunity levels right now?
They make a point that the U.S. hasn't really had a massive wave recently, the kind that boosts natural immunity across the board. Plus, booster uptake. Well, it's been low.
How low are we talking?
The reports mentioned less than a quarter of adults got the latest one. So the experts quoted. They interpret this as meaning our collective immunity has probably waned quite a bit.
Okay, so it's the variant plus the situation it finds here, like fertile ground, because our overall protection might be lower.
Precisely. There's a quote from one expert, pretty vivid actually, saying this could let the virus come back with a little bit of vengeance.
Vengeance, huh?
Yeah, they see that mix, more transmissible variant, possibly lower immunity, as potentially setting the stage for an increase.
And then there's just the normal rhythm of COVID too, right? The sources mention that seasonality.
That's right. The sources remind us, regardless of the specific variant, COVID cases often seem to tick up twice a year. We usually see bumps in summer and winter. It follows a pattern.
So you've got the variants, transmissibility, waning immunity, and maybe this underlying seasonal trend all possibly coming together this summer.
That seems to be the thinking outlined in the sources, yeah.
Yeah.
Leading to that expectation of maybe a mild to moderate uptick.
Okay, which naturally brings us to vaccines. How do our current shots stack up against MB.1.8.1, according to these sources? And what about future ones?
Okay, so the current booster, the sources note, targets JN.1. Now, JN.1 is related to NB.1.8.1.
Related how closely?
Close enough that the expectation is the current vaccine should provide some protection against NB.1.8.1 too, some degree of cross protection.
Okay, some overlap. And what about the fall vaccines? Are they expected to cover it?
So updated vaccines are expected for the fall. Interestingly, they're being designed to target LP.8.1, the variant that was dominant before NB.1.8.1 really took off.
Huh. So targeting the previous one.
Yeah, but data mentioned in your sources from Pfizer and Moderna suggests these updated shots are also expected to work against NB.1.8.1.
Okay, so both current and the planned fall vaccines should offer some protection. But this is where the sources raise something else, isn't it? Something the doctors quoted seem really concerned about who actually gets these future shots.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is maybe one of the most significant takeaways from this whole set of materials. It's about planned policy changes around vaccine eligibility.
What changes are they talking about?
The sources highlight that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, plans to limit approval for updated COVID shots, mainly to older adults and younger people with certain medical conditions.
Limiting approval.
Yeah. And on top of that, the CDC recently stopped recommending COVID vaccines for healthy children and pregnant women.
Okay. And why are the experts quoted in these sources worried about those specific changes? What's the concern?
Well, they're expressing concern that by shifting who's prioritized or even recommended for vaccination, certain groups, the reports specifically call out healthy kids, and pregnant women might become more vulnerable.
Vulnerable to what? Just getting COVID or?
Vulnerable to severe outcomes from COVID. And this worry seems particularly focused on the coming winter.
And it's not just those groups, is it? I thought the sources mentioned concerns about healthy adults too.
That's right. The concern does extend more broadly. Experts in the sources point out that even healthy adults who were vaccinated before, well, their protection might not be optimal over time because, as one expert put it, immunity wanes and we know the virus evolves.
Right. Immunity fades, the virus changes.
Exactly. So limiting broader access to updated shots raises questions about overall protection levels for everyone as we face future waves or variants.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up based on the sources you shared. We've looked at NB.1.8.1. The data so far, key phrase there, suggests it spreads more easily. But, importantly, the WHO hasn't found evidence it's making people sicker or is much better at dodging immunity than the last variant.
Right. And while a huge surge isn't necessarily predicted for the U.S. right now, experts do anticipate a possible mild to moderate summer increase. That's driven by the mix of its transmissibility, likely lower population immunity here from lack of recent waves and low booster uptake, and just those normal seasonal virus patterns.
But maybe the biggest red flag raised by the experts in these sources isn't just about NB.1.8.1 itself. It's about those planned changes to who gets future vaccines.
Exactly. The worry seems to be that these policy shifts could leave certain groups, healthy children, pregnant women, even healthy adults whose immunity has waned, potentially more vulnerable, especially thinking ahead to winter.
Which really leaves us with a kind of challenging thought, doesn't it? Pulled straight from these sources.
It does. It's this question. We know immunity fades. We know the virus keeps changing, keeps evolving. So how do these planned changes, limiting access to updated vaccines for many people, how does that square with the long-term reality of needing to manage a virus that isn't going away and keeps throwing us
A
curveballs?
lot to chew on there. Thanks for digging into these sources with us and helping unpack what they're telling us right now.
Absolutely. It's a complex picture.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.